Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're going to be talking about the spell Tree Stride. All right, Sam, I don't know, this one seems kind of silly to me, but I
Yeah.
guess it's kind of cool, maybe. What does it do?
Okay.
You step into a tree, and you step out of another tree of the same kind
It
within
doesn't really have to
500
be the
feet.
same kind. It's just to be big.
Well, I think it does.
Enter a tree, move from it inside another tree. Oh yeah, it does have the same kind. Okay,
Yeah.
what makes this marginally worse, but not that much worse.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to come down to your dungeon master saying there is a tree you can step through or there is not.
Correct. If you're at the table and your DM has worked out that these are birch trees and those are oak trees and those are of different variety and strain of X tree, tree stride might not be where you want to be, but
Or this DM might not be where you want to be.
Yeah. For the most part, I think what's going to happen is you're going to be like, is there a tree nearby? And the DM's going to go, yes. And then you're going to go, is it the same as the other trees around? And they're going to go, what? Yeah, sure. That's exactly how the conversation's going to go. I guarantee it. So, yeah, the gist of it is for a minute, you get to spend a movement to go into trees and come out trees elsewhere. It's, in my opinion, one of the cooler spells in the game. I'm a big fan of Tree Stride. This is also probably a spell in my top 10. Or at least it would be if it were anything lower than 5th level. But as it is, it's nifty, it's gimmicky. It's something that dryads are doing.
How are you picturing this? Are you just melding into the trunk of the tree, or are you like crawling through a hole, or what?
See, that I like the image of like a gnome druid doing this, and like the tree, it just kind of like he grabs his hands and he like pulls the bark apart, and there's this little purple mystical mist, and he slides through it, and then it just shoots back together, and then a similar portal somewhere else in a tree just pops open and he like flumps out of it. I don't know. It's very whimsical in that mind. You could also just be like the cool badass shadow stalker ranger who just out of the corner of the baddie's eyes, they see you disappear behind a tree and you appear behind them with 2 short swords and stab them in the back, right? Like those are the kind of visual imageries you can get with this. I think it's better when it's sillier, but that's how I view most of Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah, I don't know. This cell is definitely of the silly variety for sure.
I don't know. It doesn't have to be. You know, that first illustration you gave doesn't make it sound as silly as I was picturing. It sounds more cool when you said it like that.
Nice.
But anyways, so when do you use this? Or this is Druid and Ranger, and it's a 5th level spell. So
so
Rangers are getting this pretty late.
Yeah, immediately we're like, okay, how is this at 9th level and how is this 17th level? And it is a little bit more interesting to talk about than a lot of the Druid Ranger spells because this is, I think, still slightly better on the martial characters than it is on the full casters. Because most of the time, the martial characters care a bit more about where they're positioning and how they want to approach fights. They tend to be caring about their weapon ranges. They care about being able to get in and out of the thick of things as they'd like to. So this isn't entirely uncastable on your ranger. It doesn't feel great, but it's not like they'll be, if you are for some reason in the upper tiers and still in Elwyn Forest, then yeah, this will be something you're pretty happy with for the most part. The whole package of it does some neat things. I think the ultimate problem with this spell is by the time you get this, I think a lot of games will like steer out of wooden environments towards the mid game and head towards more high stakes, like drastic environments, going towards the Arctic, go into hell, go into, fight undead in the crypts below, right? I think you're starting to get, especially the higher and higher level you are, less and less in wooded environments where the spell is even castable. Because ultimately that's the torrential downfall of Tree Stride. The reason why the spell I think is largely uncastable is there's just so many encounters where this is clearly unusable. And even if you are in like a decent enough environment that is somewhat wooded, sometimes you just don't care to move from this tree to that tree. Sometimes that isn't a relevant, meaningful choice. And this is only really good when there's lots of large trees about. And that's frankly kind of bad.
Yeah, it's like a teleport spell dependent on there being trees around.
Yeah. And you would I think a lot of people have it like it's a given. Like, oh, you're adventuring, you're in the Forgotten Realms, you're trudging through and killing gnolls and going through the goblin camps in the woods. And, occasionally you're diving into a dungeon, but there'll be normally some amount of trees for these fights. But for a 5th level slot, especially if you're a ranger, that means you're never really in an environment, not never, but infrequently in environments where you want to be using one of your capstone resources on this. If it's like on the way to the baddies, you are ambushed by some hill giants and you're a 17th level character, are you really going to burn your only 1 or 2 5th level spell slots on this? Like, I don't think so. I think you're just going to shoot the hill giants and move on, right? And then if you're the druid at 9th level, you have to wonder, well, how relevant is Tree Stride? And if you're like a moon druid, it's kind of relevant because you can cast it and bonus action wild shape, and then run through a tree and then appear out behind and start mauling some things. That's nifty. But it takes concentration too, so it's going to drop pretty easily. I don't know. I think the effect is really nifty, but it's the wooded environment I don't think is all that common. And I think even in that environment, is it that good? I don't think it's that good.
In that environment, I guess it's okay. Well, how does it compare to other, teleport spells like Misty
like
Step
easy.
or Dimension Door? Or...
Sure. I'm really high on Dimension Door. I've talked about Dimension Door being one of my favorite little nifty problem-solving spells, kind of like you get to be in the best location. And a big reason Dimension Door I think is as good as it is it is agnostic of the environment. Whenever you're casting Dimension Door, you are going from where you are to where you want to be. It doesn't care if there are trees involved. It doesn't care that, you can be in a mausoleum fighting the undead lich. You can be fighting God himself at the pearly gates. You can be in Mechanist fighting the billions of Modrons. You can be in the Wizard's Tower. All of those environments that Dimension Door works and works well. You can find cool ways to do it. Out of combat, there's tons of cool ways that in every environment you can find a way to get Dimension Door to get you and a buddy somewhere. It notably brings buddies along. And whenever you're using that kind of magic, the reason it's so powerful is because you want to really badly be in a spot. And Tree Stride doesn't really let you that frequently be in the spot you really want to be. Sometimes you'll be able to be like, okay, great, I'm going to enter into this tree and appear up on the top of that spruce, 180 feet in the air if we're in this megafauna kind of environment, right? If we're going back Jurassic Park style, prehistoric mega trees, kind of supernatural, journey to the center of the earth kind of stuff, right? But like, again, that's not going to be most environments. Most of the time, the reason Dimension Door is so good is it puts you and a buddy. That's another big thing Dimension Door has over this is lower level. It brings a friend to the best spot. And at that point, I don't know how much you really care about going back. I don't know how super relevant it is that you can do it multiple times. Most of the time you want to do it once to do the thing that you'd like. It gets you across the gap to drop the or raise the portcullis. It gets you across the bridge to lower it, right? That is the power of Dimension Door. Tree Stride has to have trees nearby. So kind of you could get across a gap to drop a bridge. Kind of you can go over into the courtyard and raise the portcullis. But it's dependent on there being a tree there. And once you do it, you don't really need Tree Stride anymore, right? You've already gotten to the location you wanted to get, and getting back is often going to be less relevant, especially whenever we're attaching it to fixed locations.
If that's your objective, to lower a bridge or something. But I'm picturing it more as you're in a battle in the woods and you're just hopping from tree to tree, and oh shucks, where'd you go? And sure. He gets 2 arrows in the back. By the time he turns around, you're gone to another tree.
That's why I think it's particularly good on Ranger, and it's unfortunate that it happens at 17th level, because that is the use case of it, right? It is, you are using it as a tool to get out of vision range, to stay hidden, to attack from unseen locations pretty freely. It's a way to navigate an environment in a really cool, complex way that sounds like a capstone feature. Its duration only being a minute is kind of sucky. It being concentration, taking an action to cast is kind of sucky. And it can make it so that fantasy is still hampered a little bit. And then you then have to ask, well, at 17th level, are we really just going to be fighting goblins in the woods? Are we really going to be in a basic wooden environment where this capstone battle's
are
happening?
In the woods?
But how often, like most of the upper tier stuff, like if you're going against something of epic proportions, if you're going against Tiamat, how often are you fighting the god of dragons in the woods, right? How often are even you fighting the higher CR stuff in the backyard? Like, it's not all that common. There will be some instances.
Trees are not uncommon.
Listen, I
think Tiamat has a garden.
Sure, and then you can teleport exclusively within Tiamat's garden. Joyous day, we've done it. Like the adventuring environments that are written out even in like things like the DMG, right? We're talking about Arctic, we're talking about deserts, we're talking about forests, yes, we're talking about mountains, and in some environments like plains and mountains, there'll be sparse trees. But are sparse trees useful compared to heavily dense trees in this? And I don't really think they are. If we're talking about the fantasy of the ranger ducking in and out of cover and all those things, if there's only 3 trees within 500 feet of each other, well, there's 3 locations they know you're going between, and there's not a whole lot of cover around them. So how useful does that even become, right? Is that even something that's
Oh no, I mean, I won't argue that this is not hampered by its trees limitations. Yeah, it's not as good as something like Dimension Door, but I don't know. I just don't see the trees being as rare as you seem to think they are.
I think you would be surprised. Whenever you're out fighting things, if it isn't on the way to kill the bad guy, if you're at the bad guy, think about how many trees are within how many trees you could use this with. Trying whenever you're on battle maps, as I DM almost exclusively. I notice on the battle maps I'm running things on. I notice on like a city battle map. I notice on a desert battle map. I notice on a forest battle map where the relevant cover locations are, where my players can climb trees. And I've had the wooded environments where this would be good. They tend to be my lower tier environments because that's somewhat feels like an introductory level to things. Fighting the brown bears and wolves in the woods is kind of what feels like early level adventuring, right? When you get to the higher and higher tiers and you're fighting in palaces and you're fighting in environments that are more and more exotic, in the fantasy game, I think you're going to see that there are fewer and farther between trees to go to. And it may seem like, oh, no, it's a given. There'll be trees there. I think it's less given than people think.
Yeah, it's certainly not given.
I think it's less given than you think.
I'm not saying it's given. However, let's see. Is there, I can't recall any off the top of my head. Are there any spells that allow you to just manifest trees?
Oh God, I haven't read plant growth in a hot minute. I don't think so.
No, that'd be neat though.
It would. If there is a spell out there in the player's handbook, listen, there are a lot of spells in the player's handbook. I get that I read and review all of them, but I forget what spells I've written about is how many of these I go through. But like, if there is a spell out there that lets you create a tree, then you have to ask yourself the question of, is making a tree with a spell and then casting Tree Stride to get to that tree better than Dimension Door? It's not. Well, it's not better than a lower level spell.
You would need two trees at least.
Yes, so you have to conjure 2 trees. Yeah. I don't want to like, again, I like this spell a lot. I like the effect of this spell. I think that if this was a 3rd level spell, I'd be like, yeah, this is pretty worth it. It's not going to work in the most circumstances, but the circumstances it does, you're going to have a lot of fun with it. At 5th level, I'm like, that isn't it. This does not do anything that useful for 5th level, I don't think. Like, if we're comparing this to Misty Step, I most of the time would rather have Misty Step, because Misty Step, again, it's more flexible. I'm going to be able to use that in a lot more environments. I'm going to be able to use that to do a lot more things. Like, even trying to navigate out of combat and explore with this, like, what do you do with it? You can only ever go to where trees are. So then you have to ask your DM, is there a tree next to that man's window? And then the DM has to be like, I guess I want you to use your 5th level spell slot on this, so sure. And I don't know, it ultimately leaves me in the spot where I like the effect. I think it's a super cool spell. I really want to play a character that deeply wants to use this, and I want to play in a game where it is very usable because it's a really fun effect.
Yeah.
The duration really needed to be like an hour. The concentration needs to be gone. And then I think we're talking about like a reasonable version of this, even at 5th level. If we're talking about what's written here, there's no reason to put this on any character ship, I don't think.
Not even for a druid.
No, so with Druid, it's, I think, substantially worse because Druids care about their positioning a lot less.
All right, yeah. Well,
if you can bonus action turn into a bird, fly up 150 feet, like then turn back into yourself, like that costs you similar-ish actions and does functionally a better thing, right? Druids at 9th level, like how often do you care about moving through trees? Like with Rangers, you care about cover, you care about positioning, you care about where you're firing from. Druids can care about that. Like I said, Moon Druids earlier kind of can care about that. It's nice that you can cast this, go into wild shape, and then do it. So you might have a couple fights with that's interesting. If you're a Moon Druid specifically, that likes turning into the giant apes and brown bears and stuff, sure. It's just I still don't. Even in that instance, you have Bark Scan. Even in that instance, you have Conjuration Magic. Even in that instance, you have better things than this, like mechanically. So you want to be doing it for the fun, and you probably can have some fun with it. I just still don't think it's that good.
Yeah. All right, one other instance. Yeah, but again, this probably is not an issue at higher levels. I was just thinking like getting into like a town across the Palisade or something, but yeah, there are better spells than, or just like fly over it or something, whatever. Yeah. I'm trying to make something out of this, but not getting anywhere.
If you're in the low magic party and this is you're the ranger in the low magic party where you're playing with a fighter, a barbarian, and a monk, this will be kind of your first access teleportation. And going from no teleportation to any teleportation is really good. So there will be situations where this spell is bananas awesome, amazing, but it's going to be at like next to no tables. So.
All right. Well, Sam, score.
I hate to do it. I think this is a 1 out of 5. I think the spell's basically uncastable. It's fun. It's nifty. I think you might get enjoyment out of it. I don't think it's ever good.
I don't think it's a 1. I'm giving it a 2. Just
all right.
For mercy's sake.
Because it's a neat idea.
Yeah. There are spells I'll give a 1, but this is a 1.
Your criteria, I think, for a 1 is you have to both hate it and acknowledge it's awful. I think that's your criteria for a 1. Fair enough.
Yeah, that'll do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. That was Tree Stride. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.